Hi guys! Well, we're going to make another recipe for your Super Bowl party, and it's called white chicken chili, and it is by far one of the best recipes that I have that I had gotten from my sister-in-law years ago. When I got the recipe, she said, oh, you got to try this recipe, and I'm looking at this recipe and thinking, really? It has a ton of ingredients in it, a ton. And I'm looking at it thinking, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to make this or not. And I've been making it ever since. It is awesome. It's got this sweet and sour and hot and spicy and all kinds of stuff going on, and it's just really tasty. So I'm going to share it with you. It's awesome for Super Bowl. It goes a long way. I used to make it and take it with us down to Mexico, and awesome recipe. You heard it here first. So let's get started. You need a big pot or a crock pot. Normally I use a crock pot, but if you don't have a crock pot, you could just use a big stock pot. Okay, it has a lot of ingredients in it. You're going to take 2 chicken breasts or 3 chicken breasts. If you like a lot of chicken in it, use a couple more. That's entirely up to you. And what you're going to do is you're going to cook your chicken breast, and you could cook it in chicken broth and whatever you want to, and what you could boil it. You could cook it and put a little broth in it. Or I don't think you need to bake it or anything like that. It just needs to be cooked chicken. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take that chicken and we're just going to shred it up and then put it in our pan. Okay, so we put the chicken in the pan. All I did was shred it up to just bite-sized pieces. We're going to take Great Northern beans, and what they are, they're white beans, and they're called Great Northern beans. Okay, they look like kidney beans or pinto beans, but they're white, and sometimes they come in a jar, sometimes in a can. Okay, you could find them anywhere. And we're going to use a lot of those. It calls for two 14-ounce jars. So I'm not going to tell you everything that I'm going to use right now. Just look at the ingredients later on. Otherwise, it's going to take too long to make this. So I'm going to use a half a cup of onion. I just chopped up an onion. That's going to go in there. You could use more or less or leave it out. Any recipes that I do, if there's something that you don't like in it, leave it out. It's that easy. Okay, so this is where the fun part comes in. We're going to put some green chilies in there, and I'm just going to use canned green chilies. And then there's a ton of different spices. Use a can of green chilies. I like the mild ones. They have hot ones. It's up to you. The green ones right now are hard to find. So, and usually you would almost have to roast them and do a little bit to them before you could get to this point. So we're using a can of them. Okay. So those are going to go in there. And then we're going to use a bunch of different spices. So we're going to use cumin, which is a spice that you have in a lot of Mexican food. Okay. And we're going to use cumin and oregano and cloves, cayenne pepper, allspice, nutmeg. So what you have going here is you got spicy and sweet. So it's a really interesting combination. It's a really interesting recipe. So it's 2 teaspoons of cumin. We're going to use some dried oregano. You could use, if you have these spices fresh, by all means. And we're just going to use 1.5 teaspoons of oregano. And we're going to use some cloves. So you have a lot of different flavors here. If you've never used any of these spices, a lot of times the cloves you'll use in cookies and different kinds of breads. And sometimes you'll find them in some soups and things like that because it has a lot of flavor. And we're going to use some allspice as well, and that's kind of a different flavor too. Okay, you're going to use 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. The recipe calls for 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of allspice and nutmeg. And if you use these spices before, you'll know that they're pretty strong, so you want to adjust that. And then it calls for cayenne pepper. Okay, this is what Cholula, or you could use any kind of red hot or whatever you like. And we're just going to put a little bit of that in there. Just a dab. And a lot of times later on, when you're starting to have the chili, you could add more hot sauce. It's easier to add later than to take away now. So that's what we'll do. Okay, the recipe calls for 4 cloves of garlic, which is kind of a lot. This is a bulb of garlic, okay? So what you want, you just want the cloves. So you could bust them up with your fingers or do it with a knife. So this is a clove of garlic. I put the garlic in the garlic press, press it into your pan, Okay? All you do is take a knife and you take the whole skin out, so you don't even have to touch it with your fingers. We're using 4 of those. If you don't like garlic, as I said before, leave it out. Okay? The next thing, we're going to use chicken broth in here. If you make your own chicken broth, you're going to need about 6 cups of chicken broth. I'm using the canned stuff. I like the lower sodium because, as I said before, you could, if it's too salty, it's hard to take that away, but if it's not salty enough, you could add later. I just am a firm believer of it's hard to take it away once you add it, so it's just an easier plan. So we're just going to use 4 cans of chicken broth. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, it also calls for some sugar. The recipe calls for a cup of sugar, which I think is way too much. So I use a little shy of a 1/4 cup of sugar. I've tried it without and it's missing something, and more, it's too much, too sweet. So I'm going to put that in there. And then you're just going to mix it together. And also, the recipe also calls for, you could put potatoes in this. You could put 6 potatoes, just diced up potatoes. And that would be up to you. Potatoes and beans, that's a lot of carbs, I think. So it's up to you. So the last thing we're going to do before we cook this is make a roux. And what a roux is, it's just like a thickening agent. So it's just it's some melted butter, some flour, and a little bit of milk, and it's just going to make like a thick paste, and that's going to go into the chili, and that's just going to make everything thicken up quite a bit. Instead of worrying about it later, you put it in the beginning and just as it's cooking, because it's going to cook for like 3 or 4 hours. If you're going to cook it in a crock pot, I'll put it on tonight for tomorrow morning, okay? But if you're going to cook it, you're going to cook it like 3 or 4 hours. In a crock pot, probably 5 or 6 hours. Put it on tomorrow morning, and then it'll be ready for dinner. So when you're going to make a roux, you're going to take a half stick of butter and you're going to melt it, okay? And then you're going to take 2 tablespoons of flour and you're going to put your flour in. Then you're going to take just a dollop of milk, okay? So you want it to look like a paste, and you don't need to heat this, but you just want it to be somewhat of a paste. So put a little bit more flour in there if you need to. You want it to look like oatmeal almost, okay? And then this is going to go in your chili. And you're just going to mix that together. Okay, so basically we're done. So what you're going to do is you're going to put the top on, you're going to cook it. When you're done with it, what you want to do, the way that I serve it, is in a bowl, take a little bit of raspberry salsa or chipotle sauce or something like that, a little bit in the bottom of the bowl, crush up some tortilla chips on top of that, put your chili on top, a little bit of sour cream on top, and you're good to go. It is awesome, and you will love it. So have fun with that at your Super Bowl party. And until next time, we'll see ya.